Let me ask you a question. When you look at your phone, when you scroll through your feeds, or use any of the major digital platforms that basically dictate the pace of our modern world, do you ever feel like you're, well, just a spectator?
Yeah, or maybe more accurately, just a statistic.
Exactly, a statistic? There's this really pervasive sensation today of just standing on the sidelines, right? Just choking in the dust of
Yeah.
these massive tech giants as they sprint past.
And they're completely optimizing their platforms for their own margin.
Right, treating the people actually using them as a total afterthought.
It's a very real feeling. I mean, the architecture of the internet we currently inhabit, it wasn't optimized for user sovereignty at all. It was optimized for data extraction.
Just pulling data out of us.
Yeah, the underlying code dictating our digital lives is fundamentally asymmetrical. The power dynamics are just totally skewed.
And that asymmetry is exactly what we're exploring in our deep dive today. So, our source material comes from a really fascinating piece of writing by author John White. It's titled The Marathon of Inclusion.
And we should clarify, this isn't your standard dry Silicon Valley white paper.
Oh, not at all.
Wow.
It's so refreshing. It's this highly metaphorical, almost mythic analysis of the tech industry. It reads like a story.
It really does.
Yeah, it uses the vivid imagery of this massive, chaotic horse race to contrast the traditional tech industry, the established guard, with an entirely different philosophy of digital architecture, one spearheaded by a figure named Ash Mufareh.
Right, and what White calls the Victory with Ash platform.
Exactly. And our mission today is to decode this grand allegory, to really wrap our heads around it. We need to take these poetic, cinematic metaphors and ground them in hard, real-world technological realities.
Because underneath all that imagery, White is making a very sharp, very structural argument. He's talking about how the internet currently operates and how an alternative open infrastructure could completely upend it.
So let's start with the antagonists of this story. White introduces the established tech giants, the search conglomerates, the social media empires, those massive hardware behemoths, and he characterizes them as these blind stallions.
Right, he describes their muscles as mountains of capital. And crucially, he notes that their hooves are shod in proprietary code.
Shot in proprietary code. I love that line.
And the jockeys writing them, they're whispering algorithms of extraction.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's such a striking image. If you think about the current state of these tech monopolies, it really does feel less like a traditional competitive race and more like like a rigged demolition derby.
A demolition derby, yeah.
Right, you have these massive drivers, heavily armored and closed ecosystems that are just smashing into one another, completely tearing up the track at a bid for market share.
Just ignoring the damage they're doing.
Completely ignoring the millions of spectators in the stands. We're all just getting pelted with the debris of, privacy breaches and algorithmic manipulation and fragmented services.
What's fascinating here is how the demolition derby analogy captures the collateral damage perfectly. Because White points out that these stallions race for a finish line defined strictly by market dominion.
Right. Walled gardens and quarterly earnings.
Exactly. And the term algorithms of extraction, that isn't just a poetic flourish, it literally defines their core mechanical function. In a walled garden, the platform doesn't just host your interactions, it intercepts them.
Intercepts. Right.
Yeah, every click, every pause on a video, every geographical movement is all harvested to build these predictive behavioral profiles.
So the user isn't the client at all.
No, the user's behavioral surplus is the raw material. It's what's being mined and sold to advertisers.
Man, so you have these heavily armored beasts stampeding in a closed loop, just churning up a ground. That is the established status quo. But if the track is being destroyed, how does a challenger even enter the race?
Well, that's where White introduces Ash Mufareh.
Right. But he deliberately avoids framing him as a jockey on a faster horse. He doesn't say, oh, here comes a bigger stallion.
No, Ash is introduced as a well digger with a blueprint of open architecture.
A well digger.
Yeah, and White emphasizes that Ash's feet are calloused not by ambition, but by empathy. It's a very deliberate contrast. While the stallions are, entirely focused on forward momentum and crushing the rival flank, the well digger is focused on the ground beneath them.
Okay, so this brings us to what White calls a major paradox in the narrative. And frankly, looking at this through the lens of traditional business strategy, it sounds like absolute madness.
It really does seem counterintuitive.
Seriously. Early in this chaotic derby, the text notes that the tech giants start faltering. Their engines are overheating, their massive data pipelines are fracturing under the load, and user trust is rapidly eroding.
Which is something we've actually seen happen.
Right, and instead of exploiting that weakness,
Hmm.
instead of sprinting past the leaders while they're broken down, Ash actually stops to help them.
Yeah, he provides them with the clarity of his foundational logic. White writes that Ash hands over architectural insights, latency solutions, and ethical frameworks for user journey mapping.
Okay, I have to challenge the logic of this from a market perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are trying to establish a new platform and your billion-dollar competitors are suddenly stalling because their infrastructure is failing, why on earth would you hand them your latency solutions?
It seems crazy, yeah.
Isn't giving away the very architectural insights that make your system better just a surefire way to lose the race? I mean, shouldn't you just wave goodbye and take the lead?
Well, that assumes you're playing the same game,
Right.
right? That you're aiming for the exact same finish line. Let's translate what latency solutions and foundational logic actually mean in a real-world network context.
Okay.
The established tech giants are built on top of a shared foundational layer, the internet's underlying infrastructure. DNS resolvers, edge computing nodes, fundamental routing protocols.
Nuts and bolts of the web.
Exactly. When massive walled gardens become too bloated, they don't just crash themselves, they strain the entire global network. They cause bottlenecks, massive server outages, and data packet loss that affects everyone.
Because no matter how big their walled gardens are, they still have to rely on the same public roads to get data to the user.
Precisely. If Ash wants to build a new, open platform, he needs that underlying network to remain stable. White writes, you prioritize the health of the ecosystem over the victory of your own vessel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ash isn't fixing their axles out of mere charity. He's preventing the total collapse of the digital commons
That makes a lot of sense.
by providing latency solutions, which basically means optimizing how quickly data travels across nodes, and by offering frameworks for how to map user data without violating foundational trust, he's stabilizing the very track everyone is running on.
So it's this realization that you just can't build a better future on an internet that is actively collapsing under the weight of its own extraction.
Right. If the underlying trust and infrastructure of the internet fracture completely, nobody wins. Ash stabilizes the track because his ultimate project requires a foundation that won't just give way beneath him.
And the giants take this help. They implement his logic, they patch their data pipelines, and they speed off. White makes a point to note that they don't look back, and they certainly don't thank him.
Of course not.
They just take the open source fixes and use them to accelerate their own proprietary extraction engines.
Because their vision is entirely constrained by their competitive blinders, they are genetically programmed to see only market share. So they process open source contributions not as a collaboration, but just as a free resource to be consumed.
Which leaves Ash completely behind in the dust. The stallions surge ahead, they swerve to crush open source upstarts, they whip past privacy advocates, and all the while, the billions of spectators are watching this happen from behind rusted fences, completely parched for what White calls sovereignty over their own digital lives.
And sovereignty, digital sovereignty, is the pivot point of this entire analysis. Because in the current model, your identity is rented. You log in using a major tech company's credentials, right?
Yeah, constantly.
Your photos live on their servers. Your professional network is locked in their database. Sovereignty means reversing that polarity. It means you hold your own cryptographic keys, you control access to your data, and you grant or revoke permission on a granular level.
So since Ash is no longer even trying to compete on their track, he pivots. He starts building an entirely different path. White describes it as a long ridge, the rocky path of sovereign infrastructure, decentralized identity, and human-centric flow.
Notice the adjectives White uses there: rocky path, long ridge. Building sovereign infrastructure is painfully slow compared to just spinning up a centralized server.
For sure.
When you build a centralized platform, you have total control. You can push updates instantly, scale rapidly, force users to accept new terms of service overnight. But building a decentralized system where consensus has to be reached, where data is distributed across nodes, where cryptography secures user autonomy, that requires a completely different architectural discipline.
Here's where it gets really interesting, at least to me. It's like the difference between building a luxury sports car and a public transit system.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. The tech giants are completely obsessed with building the fastest, most exclusive sports car. They're fine-tuning their 0 to 60 times for a select few who can actually afford the toll roads.
Hmm.
Ash, on the other hand, is out there painstakingly laying down rails and paving roads for a massive, free public transit system.
Yeah.
It's unglamorous, takes incredibly long, and the people in the sports cars are basically laughing at you while you're pouring the concrete.
And yet a sports car only moves a few people. Public transit fundamentally alters the economic reality of an entire city. To build this infrastructure, White says Ash drops breadcrumbs along this rocky path. He calls them compostable tools, open gates, and transparent ledgers.
Okay, let's ground those breadcrumbs in reality for a second. What does it actually mean to build a platform out of compostable tools?
So, in software engineering, traditional platforms often create massive technical debt. They build monolithic code bases that require huge amounts of energy and centralized server power to maintain. Compostable tools refers to modular, open-source microservices.
Things that can break down and be reused.
Exactly. It's software that can be used, adapted, broken down, and repurposed by other developers without leaving this toxic proprietary lock-in behind. It feeds the ecosystem rather than draining it.
And the open gates would be the antithesis of the walled gardens. Instead of closed APIs that prevent you from taking your data elsewhere, open gates imply total interoperability.
Right, the ability to seamlessly move your digital identity from one application to another without friction.
That sounds amazing. And then that's followed by transparent ledgers, which points directly to distributed ledger technologies, right? Like blockchain architectures.
Yes. In a centralized system, a single company holds the database, meaning you have to trust them not to alter or manipulate the records. A transparent ledger distributes that database across the network.
So everyone can see it.
Yeah, trust isn't demanded by a corporate entity anymore. It's mathematically proven and visible to anyone who wishes to audit it.
This combination of decentralized identity, open interoperability, and transparent ledgers leads to White's most profound observation, I think. He states that Ash isn't trying to build a faster horse to race the giants. Instead, he passes his canteen of knowledge to the crowd. He's teaching the spectators how to run.
That's a powerful shift. By open sourcing the architecture, the fundamental relationship between human and machine changes. The traditional model relies on a strict binary, right? You have the creator platform that produces and the passive user who consumes and subsequently extracted from.
The people choking in the dust.
Exactly. But when you distribute the tools of creation, when users hold their own data, run their own nodes, and govern the protocols they use, that binary just completely collapses.
White writes that the crowd stirs, not to cheer for Ash, but to rise with him. They take the foundational logic he provided, and they apply it themselves. He says they are no longer users. They are a river, a current of co-creators flowing beside you.
That term, co-creator, fundamentally changes the economics of the platform. Think about Wikipedia or the Linux operating system.
Right.
These aren't built by a centralized army of employees. They're built by a decentralized river of co-creators. When a platform is genuinely open, the community doesn't just use the infrastructure. They maintain it, they police it, and they expand it.
That shift from passive user to active co-creator that sets the stage for the climax of the narrative, the end of the derby. Because the stallions, fueled by that closed-loop extraction, they do eventually cross their finish line. White says they crest the final hill and break the tape, which shimmers with market cap, user count, closed-loop dominance.
They achieve the exact financial victory they engineered their algorithms for.
But Ash is nowhere near the winner's circle. When the giants circle back, White describes Ash kneeling in the middle of the track, striking stone to create a wellspring. This is the culmination of the Victory with Ash platform. It isn't a faster vehicle. It is a perpetual aquifer.
And an aquifer is a vital metaphor here. A centralized tech giant operates basically like a bottled water monopoly.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, they build a fence around the lake, pump the water into plastic bottles, and sell it back to a thirsty crowd at a premium, all while claiming they're providing a necessary service. An open protocol, a perpetual aquifer, shatters that business model by simply making the water freely accessible to anyone willing to dig a well.
So an aquifer where every runner, whether it's an individual citizen, a small developer, or even a massive global enterprise, can just draw water without asking permission or paying a toll. And that leads to the ultimate shift in power. The text notes that the billions of spectators completely ignore the victors in the winner's circle. They rush past the crystal trophies and the flashing bulbs, and they go straight to the aquifer.
They go where the water is free.
So what does this all mean? If we step out of the metaphor entirely, how does this actually play out in the real market? How does a decentralized aquifer offering free and open tools ever manage to outcompete a trillion-dollar market cap built on data extraction?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it defeats it by redefining the very nature of competitive advantage.
Redefining it how?
Well, the old guard operates under the assumption that speed, massive capital reserves, and the forceful lock-in of users are the ultimate market advantages. But White's thesis is that Ash proved something far more potent. He proved that the ultimate competitive advantage in a hyper-connected world is generosity.
Generosity. Using generosity as a competitive strategy sounds almost, dangerously naive for the modern tech landscape.
I know, it sounds naive until you actually observe its structural mechanics. Generosity in software architecture is a ruthlessly effective acquisition strategy.
Right.
Yeah, by prioritizing the stability of the ecosystem, by giving away latency solutions when competitors were failing, and by building tools that empower users rather than trapping them, Ash acquired the single most valuable asset in the digital age, an asset that mountains of capital literally cannot artificially generate.
Trust.
Absolute foundational trust. When an entire ecosystem of developers and users realizes that a platform is designed to increase their agency rather than their exploitation, they migrate.
And they don't just migrate, they build, they contribute. The walled gardens won what White calls the sprint of extraction, but that is inherently a dead end.
Yeah.
Once a platform has extracted all available value from its users, it inevitably degrades their experience to extract more, which we actually see happening across major platforms today.
All the time.
But Ash, however, won the marathon of inclusion.
Because an open architecture doesn't degrade as more people use it, it strengthens through network effects. White observes that Ash never actually crosses the giant's finish line because he built his own, far out in the landscape where the heavily armored stallions cannot gallop.
And it isn't a line at all, is it? It's a circle.
Right. White says in that circle, the masses are not behind you, they are beside you, they are you. That line dismantles the entire hierarchical structure of Web 2.0. There is no longer a platform overlord dispensing services to a subjugated user base. There's only a decentralized network of shared infrastructure and shared prosperity.
It completely flips the script on how we're supposed to interact with technology. And honestly, it makes you evaluate the tools in your own phone with a much more critical eye.
It really does.
Yeah. As we wrap up this deep dive, take a moment to really look at the digital spaces you inhabit daily. Are the platforms you rely on functioning as walled gardens, carefully engineered with algorithms of extraction to monetize your attention? Or are they built on open architectures that grant you sovereignty over your own data and identity? Are you being treated as a co-creator of the digital world? Or, well, merely as a resource to be mined?
The transition from the former to the latter is the defining architectural challenge of the next decade. And the models we choose to adopt will determine whether our digital future resembles a chaotic demolition derby or a sustainable public aquifer.
I want to leave you with one final thought, drawing from the very last line of John White's text. He writes that when the massive stallions finally look back from their empty, isolated winner's circle, they realize a terrifying truth. They realize they were never actually racing against Ash. They were racing past the very people Ash had stopped to serve.
Wow.
And then White says, in the long run, the river always outlasts the thunder.
The river always outlasts the thunder.
Consider the implications of that for a moment. If the traditional tech giants, the Thunder, are solely focused on sprinting toward closed-loop dominance, what exactly happens to their market dominion when the billions of spectators they desperately rely on simply turn their backs on the track, refuse to be extracted from any longer, and decide to become the river instead?
That's the real question.
It has been an incredible journey decoding this material with you today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you on the next one.